Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November 7th Accommodation Tax Advisory Committee. We've reached the portion of this grant season where we're going to go through each of these applications and put together a recommendation to send up to Town Council. We do appreciate all the applicants turning in their applications this year and the presentations that were given to us for review over the past two meetings. So this meeting is now called to order. Did everyone receive a copy of the agenda for today's meeting? Yes. Does anybody have any questions or changes or discussions about today's agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask for an approval of the agenda, a motion to approve. So moved. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, thank you very much. Next item number 3, is the approval of the minutes. We have our minutes from the past 3 meetings, October 7th, October 17th, and October 24th. Did everyone receive copies of those minutes? Had a chance to review, and are there any questions, changes, edits to those minutes? Let's start with Monday, October 7th. And I'd look for a motion to approve. There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of approving the minutes from October 7th, please raise your hand. Approved. Moving on to October 17th, those minutes, everyone reviewed those, had a chance, any change or edits to those? Seeing none, motion to approve from someone, please. So moved. And a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. We're approved. And then our last meeting from October 24th. Again, any questions, edits, concerns? Did everybody have a chance to review those minutes? Okay. Motion, please. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Those are approved. Now, to the fun part, item number 4, new business. First up, we have the proposal of the calendar for next year's meetings, 2025. And Ms. Smith is going to run up those on the calendar there. Has anybody had a chance everybody had a chance to look at these? This is our first go. I believe these have been sent through town staff in coordination with Town Council and availability. So any concerns on the proposed agenda at this time? Okay, are we looking to approve this schedule for today or just throwing it out there?
Yes, this will be an action item for your approval. This looks pretty much like every year. There could obviously be some changes depending on meeting dates for Town Council, which they will vote on in the December 3rd meeting. But as of now, these do not correlate with any of their meetings. So once this goes into approval, it will be official and we'll post them on the website.
Very good. I'll open this up for discussion with the committee. Any questions or concerns about the dates here?
Have we moved forward on the idea of having the applicant workshop be required?
I think that's a conversation we'll take up at our next meeting when we're talking about the application packet for next year. This is just the dates of the schedule, what we're going to do during this when we get to the probably the August 4th. No, that's not it. When we go back and do I don't remember which meeting it is, where we review the application and make changes and edits, I think that'd be the appropriate time to make changes if we were to request first-time applicants to review or mandate them to come to the workshop. We would do it at that meeting.
April and July are usually the best time frame. Even April, during that DMO meeting, technically you could bring it up then, as long as we give our web administrator plenty of time to make those changes on the website before she posts the application.
So we'll be sure to do that either at the April 3rd or July 10th meeting.
If the subject is the schedule, would we consider having a second workshop so that our applicants could have an option of conflicts with the one?
Absolutely. If we decide that those workshops are going to be mandatory and we need to open a second date, then we can discuss that in that April meeting as well. we start making changes. So this is definitely something that we can update at a later time.
I think with that meeting being on August 7th, as we get into the April 3rd and July 10th meetings of planning that workshop, if that's put in place for first-time applicants to attend, it would be their responsibility to make sure that they have someone from their organization attend that meeting. But we could discuss having a backup plan in case that date doesn't work for the applicants. Any other comments on the scheduling? And none, I'd open up for approval of next year's schedule, please.
Motion to approve schedule.
First and a second, all in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Okay, this will be our schedule for 2025, pending any changes coming from town council. Then item B under new business is the review and recommendations of the 2025 application tax grants from Ms. Burnett. Welcome, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the community. This has been a great experience for me. This is the first time that I participate in an ATAX committee meeting. So thank you so much for your passion about this and your participation. This has been wonderful, so thank you. You don't have this information in your packet, and that's because even until the last minute, I was hoping that we will get some money and for Q3, and we have not received any funding yet. So as you can see, I have Q3 and Q4. Those are estimated projections that we have. So what I want to take you is to show you the revenue estimates and then talk about the allocation based on that revenue. So as you can see, Q1 and Q2 was received. So what I have here are the prior 2 years. So between 2022 and 2023, we have the total amount, or the total amount between those 2 years, there's a decrease of 4%. Again, we're talking Q1 and Q2. And then we received in 2024, so far we have received $5.9 million, which is a decrease of 5%. Again, we have not received Q3 and Q4 funding yet. So I am estimating a decrease of 8% based on all the numbers and the statistics that we're looking at. I think our number is going to be lower. I don't think it will go back as far as, hopefully not. I don't think it will go back pre-COVID years, but I am expecting a decrease. So the estimated number that I'm estimating for 2024 for Q3 and Q4 is about $6.4 million. So if we take those two numbers into consideration for 24, the total estimated revenue that I'm estimating is about $12.2 million, which is about a 7-8% decrease compared to prior years. Again, going back to the ATAX, the portion where it says ATAX grant allocation, these are what we have allocated in prior years. For 2022, we allocated about $4.3 million, which is about 32% of our revenue for the whole year. And then in 2023, we had a similar number, only a decrease of 1%, which is 4.3. And then what I'm estimating, again, keeping the 32% allocation from prior years. I mean, I know it's 32, 33%, I use 32%. So I am estimating a $3.9 million allocation. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, and I want to remind you of that. I'm hoping that the revenue number will be higher than what I'm estimating here. But something that is going to happen, we utilize our total revenue numbers to do a lot of different things. One of them is 30% that by state law we have to allocate right now to our DMO. And then we also utilize ATAX funding for CIP projects. We also use ATAX funding to fund our general fund, and also use ATAX money for our organizations that apply for our grants. So as we continue looking at our numbers, if we have a decrease of 8%, for instance, every single one of those areas, with the exception of the state mandated law of 30%, all of the other areas will also have an 8% decrease if it's an 8% decrease. Questions? Comments?
Thank you
Yes.
for putting this together. The total amounts of grants that we received that were asked for was 4.2?
It was 4.2, Shanna. I think it is 4.2. Yes. So we need to make some hard decisions as it relates to, if the amount comes back to be in reality $3.9 million, then yes, you need to make some hard decisions in your proposal to council, because we won't be able to pay the 4.2 to our organizations that apply for the grant.
Out of that 12, the 12 million, if you go back one page, out of that 12 million, was 15% of that total taken for housing? Or out of the tax funding?
So we have CIP, we have general fund. Is housing one of them? Yes, Erica's saying housing is one of them, yes.
Do you know what that number is that was taken for housing?
I don't have that number, no, I do not.
You have a question?
That was my question.
Okay.
That was your question? Okay. Let me, Erica, do you know by any chance what's the percentage that we normally take for housing? So it's 15% is Erica. Erica, by the way, is our senior budget analyst for the town, and she's the one that keeps me in line, by the way, with numbers. It is 15% according to her calculations.
Are your Q3 and Q4 estimations based on data from the first two quarters, and is it based on occupancy levels or on ADR?
It's based on the prior 2 quarters and based on the trend that we have seen during the year, and also thinking about what's happening with our island and some of the accommodation calculations that the DMO is doing right now.
Any other questions?
Any
Thank you very
concerns, questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. With that being the case, it looks like we're gonna have a delta of about $350,000 on grant request to what is projected to be available. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. What we've done in the past for the new members is each of the applicants is here on the spreadsheet. We'll start in that first round and go through and make recommendations, have conversations about each of these if it's needed, and then sum the total at the bottom, take a look at it and see what adjustments need to be made. We can go through that as many times as we need to land on a number that we feel has a good chance of passing through town council. So any questions before we get started? Seeing none, we'll start at the top with the Art League of Hilton Head. I'll open this up to the committee for any comments, and then after comments are made, a recommendation for the Art League of Hilton Head. This is your chance. Any recommendations, any conversations, any questions for the Art League?
I just had a general question. Given the fact that we are looking at this reduced amount, should we do it across the board, or how do you recommend that we do this?
I think we should look at them. I mean, this is what we've done in the past, and that's up for us to discuss and decide. But what we've done is just taking these one by one, view them as their own, and then just see where the chips fall. After we go through that, we'll see if we're above what we believe is projected to be available, and we can go back and start having conversations. But I think just treating each one individually to start now, I don't think our go-to is just automatically chop 10% off of each of them just to get started. So
Well, there are some that only we reimburse a certain amount anyways.
correct, yeah. So we'll start with the Art League of Hilton Head. Any conversations on that application?
I thought that their application was complete. They did a great presentation. I think they're a worthy organization, and I have no qualms, granting their request.
Is that a recommendation for full funding?
At this point, yes.
Okay, there's a recommendation to fully fund the Art League of Hilton Head for $80,000. Is there a second for that one? Okay, we'll go ahead and put a placeholder of $80,000 there for the Art League of Hilton Head. Next on the list is the Art Center of Coastal Carolina. The request was $447,000. I'll open that one up for conversation from the committee, please.
I move to fully fund.
There's a recommendation to fully fund $447,000 to the the Art Center of Coastal Carolina. Is there a second to fully fund that?
Second.
Okay, we'll put that in for $447,000. Next up is the David Carmine's Memorial Fund. The application request was $185,000.
I recommend that we approve their application in full.
There's a recommendation to fully fund $185,000. In a second, we'll go ahead and place in $185,000 there. Next is the Golem Museum of Hilton Head Island. Conversations, recommendations for this applicant.
Mr. Chairman, during the discussion, we had a request to get some additional financial information from the Gullah Museum. We didn't have their full list of 25 expenses or a balance sheet. Can you kind of comment on whether we got anything?
I did receive additional budget information. It's on the spreadsheet that y'all have up there.
Give us 1 second to review this one, please. I'll start off with this one. I think my recommendation to start this one off is taking it down to last year's request of $150,000. Any conversations, recommendations, changes to that recommendation?
As seeing that their budget they provided after the first meeting, max amount reimbursable still exceeds the $180,000 ask, I would recommend to
Anybody else want to chime in here on?
I support Martin's move on this. I think that while we need to be responsible in terms of where these dollars get spent, I think that's a critical element for this island. And given that they came back and provided the additional information that we asked for, I would support the full recommendation. Happens as we go through the list coming back, because there's a lot of obviously worthy organizations.
Okay, let's go ahead and put in the $180,000 to fully fund that one.
Chairman, from looking at the list of the max reimbursable amounts, it seems like the difference is pretty small. Correct?
For the Golem Museum?
You're saying that people's asks that were more than the max reimbursement. So places where we would save money regardless, because we can't ask.
That's correct.
So there are gonna have to be some places where we're going choices, correct?
Yep, correct.
I would say that it's a little bit difficult to go through the list on this information at the last minute, trying to, as a line item thing, and almost seems like we've had a discussion about it in general. As just going through the list, we're gonna get to the end of the list.
Well, this is your opportunity on each of these applications to raise concerns or make recommendations that you think down the line. You know, obviously, if we're looking at a 350,000 difference between what's been asked for and what is gonna be available, presuming that that number is right, I'm looking at this list as a whole and on this first pass, trying to say, okay, we can go through this and fully fund all of them on the first go, if you like, and then in round two, we'll do the exact same thing and make those changes. So as we're going through each of these, let's have the conversation of, it's not that I don't believe that the applicants are worthy of full funding, it's we're not gonna have that funding available. So we know we're gonna have to cut some of these down of what's gonna be recommended to town council. If you wanna do it on the second pass, that's welcome, but this is an opportunity to, is that okay? Okay.
Isn't there a consideration to the fact that the number we're working is determined?
Yeah, it makes our jobs really hard. It's not town staff's fault. It just hasn't been reported from the state, so we're kind of shooting in the dark right now.
Yeah, it's not a criticism, it's more of is it a recommended, is it a mandate that we get to that 3.8 number with a $350,000 reduction, or is it a recommendation?
Unfortunately, excuse me, unfortunately, this is all we have right now.
I won't bring it up again.
I think what he's asking is that, what he's asking is that without knowing the number, if we go over the 3.8 in our recommendations, then the ultimate decision would rely on, because it could be, for all we know, it could be 4 million. Because we did have a pretty good third and fourth quarter. So then those cuts would come from the town council, correct? Okay.
Okay, any other conversations about the Golden Museum of Hilton Head Island? Okay, we'll leave 180,000 there and then move on to Harbortown Merchants Association. The application request was for $29,000.
The max reimbursable according to the town is 14,951. I'm not sure, did you have any conversation with Merchants Association about their budget, Jenna?
Yes, they also sent in additional budget information that's been updated as well on their form. So those numbers have been updated based off what they've just recently sent.
Sorry, I was working off the last set of sheets.
It looks on the reimbursable, if you're looking on that one, for category 2, the request was for 19,720 with an eligibility of 47. So they're good on the 19.72. They're also have plenty of room for category 4, which the request was 2,610 with a maximum reimbursement of 6,440. And then for category 5, 6,670 was the request with a maximum reimbursement of 19,320. So their maximum reimbursement available would be 72,760. Okay. Harbortown Merchants Association. $29,000 is the request. Any recommendations here?
I would recommend that we approve that request in full.
Any other conversations, concerns? Okay, let's put 29,000 there. Hilton Head Audubon Society. The request was for 21,400.
I believe this is the one where they showed a profit for the last 4 years, so I would recommend that we maybe can cut this back.
Any other comments? Looks like the request was for 21,400, but their maximum reimbursement is only 20,764. They do have a high tourism number at 87%. Do you have a recommendation for?
I recommend we cut this back to 15.
Any other conversations for the Audubon Society? Okay, let's put 15,000 there. If you don't mind, as we put these in below the request, can you change the font or highlight the cell so we know which ones at a quick glance? Maybe change that to red. Or yellow. Just, yeah, that's fine. Great. Okay, we'll move on to the Hilton Head Choral Society. The request was for $20,000. Maximum reimbursement eligibility is $37,360. I'll open this one up for conversations, please.
This particular organization, I'm a representative from the lodging industry, and, you know, I'm looking at these in terms of bringing people to the island to attend events, and there are several in here that I don't think really generate the numbers of people, but they are still a part of the community, and they are still, they're so integrated with other organizations, and this is one of those. They work with the symphony, they do, you know, all that. So I think we should fund them. I'm not sure if you know, if in terms of tourist numbers, if that might be where we start in terms of having to chop a little bit. This might be one that we want to look at, because it really does not bring in the number of people. You know, their percentage was pretty low.
I would agree with that. I mean, the tourism numbers come in at 9% across for the Choral Society. It's just not, it's not going to generate heads and beds, but to your point, it's been around for a long time and a big part of the island and what happens in the arts and culture. So is there a recommendation for a placeholder on this one?
What was the prior request from last year?
Yeah, 15,000 last year. And that was approved through town council. My recommendation would be to put in $15,000 to match last year's awarded from town council. We didn't see that number grow year over year in tourism, and to see it jump from 15 to 20,000 in the grant, you know, you would hope to see the trend of also tourism involvement going up as well. We're not seeing the growth on that side. And again, just looking down the slate, we're going to have to make some cuts at some point. I think as a placeholder, putting 15,000 here to get us in the right ballpark may be a good place to start. But I'll leave that to you guys for a recommendation here.
I would agree with that. I would support a recommendation for 15,000.
Anyone opposed to that recommendation at this time? Okay, let's place 15,000 there and format that cell, please. Next is the Concourse d'Elegance. The application was, the request was for $350,000. That's a reduction from last year's ask of $362,000. Any recommendation for the concourse?
I recommend a fully fund.
Any other comments? Okay, let's place $350,000 in the Concourse d'Elegance. Next is the Hilton Head Dance Theater. Last year's request was for $20,000. This year it is for $23,000.
This is, again, one of the organizations that I think doesn't necessarily bring in the numbers, doesn't really, you know, generate the tourism, but it is so ingrained in the community, and it is involved in so many other organizations that we support as well. So I definitely support them. I think they're doing a great job, but I'm not necessarily sure that we can increase their funding.
Do you have a recommendation there?
I'm not sure what they got last year, but maybe we could go back with last year.
I believe last year was $20,000.
So I would recommend 20,000.
Anybody opposed to putting a placeholder of $20,000 in for the dance theater?
I recommend we align those with with the Choral Society, take it down to 15.
Any other conversations there? We have one for 20,000 and one for 15,000. We'll say for the dance theater, their number is significantly higher than that of the other applicant. Not that I'm trying to measure one against the other, but having a $3,000 increase.
I would second the recommendation.
I would recommend, let's put in 20,000 there as well, to hold it. Next up is the Hilton Head Island Airport. The application request was for $150,000. That's the matches last year's request as well. Comments and recommendations for the Hilton Head Island Airport. Our recommendation on this one is going to be full funding. They bring the tourists to the island. They're extremely involved with expanding over there. That seems like the organization's focus is to draw in more traffic to the island, having those destinations come directly to us as opposed to outside markets. So I would recommend $150,000 full funding for the airport.
I agree, being that they're in the middle of a major upgrade.
$150,000, please, for the Hilton Head Island Airport. Next is the Hilton Head Bridge Association. Request is for $21,000. Last year's request was for $15,000. Conversations on this one, please. $15,000. I would recommend matching last year's as a placeholder here of $15,000. They do a fantastic job, but that return on investment per dollar, I don't see it matching going up $6,000 from last year's application. That's me.
I'll second that.
$15,000, please, for the Bridge Association. Next is the Hilton Head Land Trust. This year's request is for $47,000. Last year's request was for $36,000. I'm sorry, the approved amount was for $36,632. Any conversation pieces here or recommendations for the Hilton Head Land Trust? The total budget for the organization is $83,000. Maximum reimbursement is $52,000 with a tourism rate of 92%. That is a $10,000 above last year's request. They requested $37,300, but eligibility only put them at $36,600. I'm going to recommend that we put $37,000 here for the land trust, matching last year's awarded amount. Any conversation pieces?
I'll second that.
Again, we can make another run. Let's see at the end of this where it settles and we can make adjustments coming through, but. Okay. Next on the list, Hilton Head Island Rec Association. This is for the Wing Fest, Oyster Fest, and Jeep Fest. They've requested $75,000 this year. Last year, they were at $60,000 was the request and the approved amount from Town Council. Conversations on the rec center's request, please. This is one that we've seen each of these events grow year over year. They've relocated where the event is held. I think they do a fantastic job. I'm going to recommend full funding here for the rec center. $75,000, please, if there's no objections. Next on the list is the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Last year, their request was for $86,000. Eligibility and awarded from town council was $74,065. This year, the request is $80,000 for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Any thoughts?
Full funding.
There's two recommendations to fully fund. Any objections for a placeholder of $80,000?
I'm reading the, here correctly. 8,388 is the maximum reimbursement.
That's correct. It looks like category 4 for them, the request was for $15,200 with a maximum reimbursement of $2,006. I'm going to recommend, by looking at the sheet here of what's maximally available, just placing in that placeholder $68,388.
Okay.
And if they're able to get that changed before it goes to town council and get that lined up so there's more eligibility in category 4, that would make a difference. But right now, I mean, the budget for that project is $4,000 and the request is $15,200. So there's some things that just don't align on that one. We'll leave it at $68,388 maximum reimbursement amount. Next is the Hilton Head Wine and Food Rhythm and Brews Fest. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're on the Hilton Head Island Wine and Food.
This is a new event, and clearly they've had some growing pains, or just getting it started has been a little harder than they expected. I would like to fund them again for another year and see how it goes. The reason that I'm recommending that is because I know that they are intertwined with the Wine and Food Fest, which has grown incrementally every year, and I think they're on the right track. I would like to recommend that we fully fund them and give them another shot.
Yeah, I would agree. I would second that, putting in $30,000 here. Any objections to that? Okay, let's place $30,000 there. And then again, Hilton Head Island Wine and Food Fest. This is for the Wine and Food Fest itself, not Rhythm and Brews. This application was for $130,000.
Recommend fully funding this. 75% tourists at this event, and this thing has grown. Draws a lot of people into the.
It really does, and that's not an increase from last year's request either, and what was approved by town council. They held true to $130,000. Place $130,000, please, in for the Wine and Food Fest. Hilton Head MLK Committee for Justice. The application was for $5,000. The maximum reimbursement for this one would be $2,980, according to the application, with a 4% tourism. I'm going to recommend zero funding for this one.
Are you going to recommend what?
Zero funding
Zero.
for this one. We could put a placeholder in there, like a tourism of 4%. I think we had this application last year as well. They were awarded $4,513.
I would agree. Again, this is one of those that just does not, the numbers don't add up in terms of tourism numbers. It's a great cause. It's a wonderful organization, and I would like to help in some way, but it's, given the fact that we've got to cut some money, I think this might be, you might be correct. So I would support your recommendation.
Any other conversations?
I would agree with the maximal max, reimbursement?
I'm okay with putting in 2,980 as we cycle through this.
We're not gonna move the needle on $2,000 one way or the other.
Agree.
If the ask is 5 and the max is 2.9, kind of in Martin's camp here, the reduction, what they've asked for, and I think we've, I don't quite agree with.
Hopefully they can sustain the event and get their numbers in line.
Okay, let's put in the placeholder of the maximum reimbursement amount of $2,980, please. Next on the list is the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. The request was for $350,000 this year. Any conversations on that one?
Given the fact that we have to cut quite a bit of money out of this proposal, I recommend we keep them whole to previous year's grant.
Last year's recommendation, so we have a recommendation to fully fund and then a recommendation for, let me find that one here, 330,000. Any other conversations on?
One of the reasons I would recommend full funding is that they're increasing, programming with that, so.
Yeah, I agree. I know where your sentiment is to, we've got to reduce at some point, but I feel like they have continued to grow and continued to spread their wings and have more of an offering. I would recommend fully funding on this one as well as we get started, and then we can adjust it coming back if that's needed be, but their numbers align. I mean, with the full reimbursement of $764,000, they're well under what they're eligible for, and their tourism number continues to grow. And their collaboration across all organizations is evident. So that's my thoughts.
Or with the 350.
Let's hope 350 there. Lean Ensemble Theater. The application is for $55,000. Last year's request was for $50,000. I'll give you a minute to review that one. Maximum reimbursement for this organization is $90,255. Tourism is at 21%. Any recommendations here?
I recommend full funding as I see this organization is growing every year and the amount of offerings that they're giving to the community is.
I would agree with that. I concur.
Any objections to putting a placeholder at $55,000 for the Lean Ensemble? Okay, $55,000 it is. Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. The request this year is for $200,000. Last year's application was, I think, $100,000.
I think we learned during the application process that they had funds coming from another government source. I forget whether it was Beaufort County or pulled from them.
Oh, yeah, that was pulled from them. I believe it was the DMO had the ear tagged amount in previous years for their supplemental grant that came in. And those monies and efforts were triggered towards the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association.
There's no supplemental. They increased it 100.
Right.
I mean, this is just one of those organizations that is focusing on something that happens every day on this island, which is drawing in folks to play one of our mini golf courses. It's a significant increase, but what they bring in. We saw the economic impact of what happens if $12+ million. Any recommendations here?
I recommend full funding. I think it's hard to show an increase like that, but at the same time, we're just filling a hole in the overall budget from one bucket of tax dollars, if you will, to another. And I think, listen to their program, heard that their average stay is in the 4 to 5 day range, so they are people who are spending money in restaurants. So I would support the full funding point.
Any objections to fully fund? $200,000 for the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. Next on the list is Long Cove Club. This is for the South Carolina Darius Rucker Ladies Collegiate event that occurs. The request was for $65,450. Maximum reimbursement eligibility here is $61,897. So we'll keep that as our starting point. Open this one up for discussion and conversations.
I think we all know the value of this event and funding for the maximum reimbursable amount.
Okay, let's put in $61,897, please. Next on the list is Low Country Gola. The application was for $100,000, which equals last year's request and granted amount from town council. Any recommendations or conversations to have about Low Country Gola?
Being that the amount of promotion that their services provide for the island, I recommend full funding.
Any objections there?
No, I concur, and their data says 82% tourist, 11% visitor, so they're doing exactly tax dollars are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, their dashboard from their website of what's being used and what they can validate. It helps all the other organizations with the efforts that they put in. So let's go ahead and put 100,000 there. Next on the list is the Mitchellville Preservation Project. Request of $190,000. Matches last year's request and approval from town council as well. Maximum reimbursement is, this one is $495,673, serving at a 50% tourism from their numbers. I'll go ahead and recommend full funding for this project. We've watched this one continue to grow over the last several years, and I think their vision and preservation is right on point. So my recommendation is full funding here.
I agree, as I think that they are pioneering
They've listened to us in terms of trying to demonstrate where people are coming from. They talked about their AI work and their scanning of QR codes at their location, so we're getting better data to support it. So
Better data and it's more impactful data. I think they're
I agree.
trending in the right direction.
190,000 for Mitchellville. Next on the list is the Native Island Business and Community. The application was for $225,000. That matches last year's application and what was also approved from town council. Excuse me.
I would recommend full funding on this one. I think they are embarking in a new direction. They have, their presentation is going to be entirely different, and I think that I think we're going to see big things from this group. So I would recommend full funding.
Your recommendation for full funding of $225,000. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay, $225,000. Next up is the Rotary Club of Hilton Head Island for $40,000. This is a first-time applicant seeking funding for the purchase of a water tank to be used at any event that was to take place on the island as a source of hydration for all that come. Open this one up for conversation, please. For me, this one comes down to the question of eligibility. I'm not sure where we stand of what Turk would say that this is okay. Again, Turk will not give us the answer. They try to stay out of it, but it'll go through the process. I think it's a worthy cause. I'm just not sure that the accommodation taxes can be used to purchase equipment that goes to a beach. You know, I think that would become a town's initiative if the town wanted to offer that as a service. I just don't know if the accommodation tax dollars that are meant for heads and beds and stirring tourism would fund this.
As I read through the Turk requirements, it indicates servicing tourists is valid. I think the responsibility here, though, is also to Ed's concept in mind. Kind of a tough term, but the reality is unless folks can generate new ATAC dollars, then or the organizations begins to balancing question there. We all agree this would be a great thing to do. It'd be lovely to have the town do it. If we're facing a $250,000, $300,000 drop, it's a little difficult to add something new that some of us have questions about Turk eligibility.
I feel it meets Turk eligibility, but sadly, we have to make cuts somewhere. I think that this idea and this concept should be approved by town council and come out of the general fund if needed. By other organizations that project. This is an elemental idea and concept for the town in the fact that we shouldn't be
Yeah,
and also, if we can remember from their presentation, they are also seeking a lot of, so this might be a reimbursable amount where they may ask for $40,000 and only need $20,000.
And the other item that we should remember too is that once they purchase this is a one-time thing. Yeah, it's done.
yeah, it's one and done.
We don't know definitively whether about eligibility for this yet. That ultimate decision to.
I mean, it's on this body to make the recommendation of whether or not we think it's up to us. If we want to recommend that town council approve and spend this money, then it would go up to Turk to see if it's eligible. And I think it's a fantastic cause and a great idea. I just don't know if it's going to pass. You know, when it's viewed under the microscope, I think even if we weren't to fully fund this one, when we go to town council and we have, we give them a write-up and say, here's where we stand on this, we would highlight this one and say, we think this is a worthy cause you should get behind. We would do it. We're just uncertain of whether or not, ATAX dollars can be spent there. It's not no to the idea or what they're trying to do. It's, does it fall to this body and this committee to make that recommendation?
For me, I would believe that it would be covered under Turk for the fact that if you're going to cover other services like bathrooms,
I would just say to that comment that I agree with you, but that usually comes from the town's general fund. It's not going to come from this committee that is making recommendations and grants to organizations that are putting, money in the bucket when it comes to tourism. So this is a tough one.
There might not be a more reflects the vision of Charles Fraser and the founders of. I would recommend that we fund and at least recommend and let the chips fall where they may with regards to town council's final decision. But I just feel like some form of funding that would be appropriate from us, and then we'll let the chips fall where they may. I just think it's that critical. It's just speak ours as a community.
That we should fund it too, and town council decide about the eligibility, but also let them decide if it needs to come from general fund.
Funding.
Yeah, similar to what we did with Habitat.
Okay. Recommendation for full funding there? Okay, let's put a placeholder of 40,000 for the Rotary Club. Next is the Sea Turtle Patrol. The request is for $70,000, maximum reimbursement of $70,000. Last year, their request was for $70,000. It was also approved by town council. I'll make a recommendation for full funding on the Sea Turtle Patrol.
90% tourists.
Yeah. Any objections to fully fund the Sea Turtle Patrol? Place 70,000 there, please. Shelter Cove Harbor Company, $293,800. I'll open this one up for conversations, please. The maximum reimbursement is $389,936, with a 78% tourism number. This is a 12-week event throughout the summer.
I know without question that these fireworks bring people to this island, no question about it. We definitely need to support this. I did have some questions about the budget. I know that there was additional information provided for us. No additional.
We took the budget details listed in the application that weren't necessarily within the budget they provided, but they were disclosed within the application and the portions that, in those text boxes. So we had some information to base numbers off of, even though it wasn't technically in the overall budget.
Everybody who lives here, we all know this is absolutely a worthy organization and we need to support it 100%.
Any objections to fully fund here? $293,800 to Shelter Cove Harbor Company. TEDx Hilton Head, a request of $10,000. I believe that's a significant decrease from previous years. Last year's application was for $45,000. That was approved by town council as well. They've reduced their request by $35,000. And it's a fantastic event, a growing event. There's no question in my mind that portioning $10,000 of accommodation tax is a good use of money here for TEDx as they wean themselves off and are striving to be independent. I think a $10,000 is not a significant ask for what they're doing here on the island.
Seeing as they've said this is their last year, they plan on asking, and they're establishing that event, and they've established it now, and they're looking to go forward.
10,000, please. Boys and Girls Club of Hilton Head. The application is for $40,000. Matches last year's request and approved amount from town council. Any objections to fully fund the Boys and Girls Club of Hilton Head? Seeing none, let's put 40,000 there. This is the Coastal Discovery Museum for a $400,000 request. Last year, the application and awarded amount was $375,000. Again, turn it to the committee for conversations and recommendation.
I would recommend full funding. I know these large dollars are hard to support when we know we may have to cut some numbers. In the past, we've supported the museum with some capital funds to build out their displays and buildings, and they are increasing attendance, and their tourism numbers are just.
I agree, as they also fit the model of cultural environmental tourism, which we're trying to grow, and they do.
Any objections to fully fund $400,000 to the Coastal Discovery Museum on this first pass? Okay, 400,000. Okay, first tee of the Low Country. They have, their budget is finalized in November. You'll see that on your remarks, and we'll get it to town staff. Looking at last year's. From 40,000 to 50,000 this year. This one has a question mark again on what's the reimbursable amount here? We're not sure what that is quite yet because we're waiting on some numbers to come in. As a placeholder, we could put the number here again. This would, our recommendation to town council, waiting for those final details to come in. Whatever number we put here is going to be higher than 0. So right now eligibility shows 0 because they're missing some items, but they should get those to us in November. Any recommendations for the first tee of the Low Country?
Chris, I'm not sure where the maximum amount allowed per Turk comes from if we don't have the data, but that's $388,000 in these spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend fully funding this.
Yeah, I think everything's going to come from category 1. I don't see there being an eligibility issue for 50,000. Typically those are funded at 100% or have the ability to be, and again, with the maximum allowed by Turk being that 388, I don't think we're in jeopardy of it not being. It's just them getting in some documents.
I just want to point out that there are significant dollars being invested and spent by the organization.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Place 50,000 for the first tee of the Low Country. Heritage Library. The grant request was for 143,000. Last year's request and approval was for $135,000.
Looks like the maximum reimbursable is 139.
Yeah, that's correct. Has a high tourism number, but going off of the max reimbursable amount, the most we could make a recommendation at this time is that 139,445 if we were to choose so. $135,000. And really where they've overshot here is in that category 2. It's only at an 80% reimbursable dollar amount. They requested 20,000 for category 2 with a maximum reimbursement of 13,145.
I had some questions when we met about the validation for their fully supportive. I also note that in the last 3 years, they've averaged they've done $23,031 and $31,000 of profit. So I wouldn't be adverse to
Being 135,000. Last year, that's what was approved by town council. 135. Any objections to placing the Heritage Library at 135,000? Here none, we'll put 135,000, matching last year's request. The Outside Foundation is next on the list, 72,000. That matches last year's request and approved amount by town council. They have a maximum reimbursement amount of 289,000.
That's our highest tourist percentage.
Yeah, the event they put on too, this is way more than just the work they do on the waterways, but the paddle event, a fantastic event that happens on our waterways that bring in a significant amount of folks from from outside the 50-mile radius.
Yes, their maintenance of the waterways is,
Only funding 72,000 to the outside foundation. Any objections? Okay. And then the sandbox. The request is for $64,000. That is about a $3,000 increase from last year's approved amount of $60,765. They have a maximum reimbursement of $82,000, serving at a 69% tourism. Their category 2 request of $27,520 is a couple $100 over what's allowed for that category. So if we can sum up, I can pull out a calculator, or if you could sum it, 21,192. That's max reimbursement, but if you look at the request on category 2, they've overshot what's eligible to come in just by a couple $100 there. So the request is for 64, but we would have to reduce that by 27,520.
Well, we're just shifting.
$803 there.
Yeah.
If they if they had the ability to shift some of those dollars up into a different category, they would be eligible if they move it to category 1.
Yep.
Your recommendation, full funding?
Well, if you want to, only fund within the expense categories. So if your suggestion is to take roughly 3,000 off to match, that's fine.
Well, I think they have plenty of room in category 1 if they were to move some of their expenditures around. They still have 6,000 in category 1 if they were, or 3, or category 3. So 64,000
So
for
is
the best.
classification of like expenses like that true?
Sure. Yeah, they can, if they end up spending more in category 1 than they're budgeted to do, they would just have less reimbursable dollars coming from that other category, category 2. They could still max out at their eligibility of 27,520.
If
I'm sorry,
we were to fully
26.
fund, knowing that there's a $3,000 mismatch, first of all, they wouldn't get that $3,000 anyway.
Fully funded $64,000 for the sandbox. Okay, that concludes our first pass here. Looks like we're at that $4,186,065, which puts us about $294 over the anticipated amount. So we have some significant conversations and work to do here. I know that this number could shift and it could be higher. Don't feel comfortable making a recommendation at $300,000 over what is being presented from town staff of what their estimated dollars being allocated are. We're going to go through these again, but let's have a conversation of the pass as a whole and see what everybody's thoughts on how we can reduce this number. Now that we've gone through and talked about each of these, would you like to review all the highlighted yellow ones and have more conversation, or go through and see where we can shave a little bit off on each of these?
Numbers while we're still in session, is there?
Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. However, we will call the state again to see if there's any update on the number for Q3.
So now the question comes to the committee of what recommendations are you wanting to make to town council? Are you wanting to make a recommendation that is above what we predict to be available and put that in the lap of town council to make the decision and the cuts? Or do we want to go through this, try our best to get it in the right realm for town council again, they can come back as they have in years past, where we haven't had questions answered on eligibility, and they were to come back and fully fund. So they're gonna go through each of these and say, you know what, numbers came in, we have 4.1 million, and they can make the adjustments. But I think what we're trying to do is just tighten the kaleidoscope of what they're viewing here.
I feel that we have to look at it and see if there's anything we can tighten up. But the ultimate decision is gonna fall on town council where to make cuts, and difficult as that decision is, part of it is because some of the funding has been taken away for other things. In this first year, it's really affecting this funding. So being the town council made that decision, I believe that some of the cuts should fall on them as well.
Yeah, it's twofold with the reduction in what's anticipated to come in being down 8-9%, plus the additional funds coming off the top to focus on workforce housing, which is a big initiative for this town. It's something that has to be focused on, but what it does to this committee is limit our resources that are available for sure, you know. But that's why we're here, you know, to have those conversations and make those decisions.
My view is that we don't need to get down to the lowest number we can, but I think we have some responsibility to the organizations and the town council to try to move it directionally toward where we think that number is going to be. Back through these again and see if we can sharpen it a little bit. Again, that's not a criticism of anyone that's applied to any of these organizations. They all do fine work, but if more money comes in, then some of those funds can be restored. But I think we need to shave some dollars off where we stand.
Is there any historical data available to us about similar circumstances? Who make cuts, recommendation to town council, and then the funding number changes? Cuts were not necessary. Do we have that opportunity to revisit historical?
They have made changes, town council has, but not in the sense where we came in a lower number and they were able to utilize more money afterwards.
I think what we vote on and move to recommend to town council is gonna be the final decision, what we're gonna write up and send to town council as to what we feel should be recommended to these organizations. Again, we're shooting in the dark though, we really are. I feel like the numbers probably going to come in a little higher than what we're anticipating, just because of the events that have happened with different folks choosing to change their destination over the last quarter. With the storms that came through, we definitely saw an increase of occupancy across the island over a 3-4 week stretch there. So who knows what that will really do. But
We, Chris, capture this list that if the funding were there, this is what we would recommend, so that town council knows where we stood prior to making cuts in anticipation of fewer dollars coming in. I understand the recommendation has to be one plan, but we should be able to present this as it sits now, as if the money is there, this is what we would prefer to recommend.
I think that's a great suggestion. Again, my Q3 and Q4 are just estimated numbers. So if this is your ideal recommendation, then I think you need to go ahead and leave it. But at the same time, I think you need to also think about where do we cut $254,000 if we need to.
Let me ask you this: when you were making your pass at what you think the final numbers will be, were you taking into account what Steve was just talking about? That maybe numbers were up because we became a destination for a lot of travelers because of storms?
No, I did not.
were you just using previous years or just following the trend of this year, what you've seen from the
Yes, so
prior
I'm using the
quarters?
trends from prior years, and in addition to looking at the DMO and what they're using in their metrics measurements. So I'm using both. Again, this is an estimated number. I wish I had a crystal ball and I can tell you this is the real number. What I'm doing right now, I'm actually asking my staff to call the state again while we're having this meeting and see if they can give us a better idea for Q3. hopefully we can get a better number today, but they haven't been able to provide that information yet.
I mean, if we're going off of this number of being a deficit of still $294,000, to your point, going through and shaving 2,000 off of each of these isn't gonna solve our problem of being over. You know, it's gonna take significant changes to some of these. So let's do another pass on these, keep that in consideration, and, you know, we could always go back to pass one, you know, look at our first go if we want to go through, but let's go through on pass two and try to shrink that number a little bit, taking into consideration as to last year's town council awarded amount, knowing that we have a hard decision here of what to do. Again, this isn't a slight on any of the applicants that you're not a worthy cause of full funding, but you can see the numbers we're up against, and we don't want to give anybody false hopes. It's going to take a little bit from all of us to get into the realm of where we need to be.
But we can make a recommendation that if the numbers come back, because I think we would classify as what we have to work with today as a conservative estimate. I know there's no crystal ball. We all know there's no crystal ball, but it's a conservative estimate. If the funding does become available, we would prefer to make our recommendation be our first round number is versus, there'd have to be some language with our recommendation to town council to, we express that clearly.
And just for your information, and this is something that, of course, our mayor has to approve to add it to the agenda, but right now we're thinking that January 14 will be the date when you will propose to council. So we still have some time to change the numbers. But again, I don't want to give false hope that the number is going to come back higher than what it is. But we won't be presenting in December like we did last year. So you will be presented on January 14. At least that's the tentative date.
Let me ask you this, is in the packet that the town council will receive, will all our passes be in that packet, or will it just be our final recommendation? I mean, I'm glad the mayor is here to see this discussion because he knows that our first recommendation will be this, but will all three of our passes be in there for our final recommendations, or no?
No.
So there won't be any of our deliberations really noticeable to them?
We can
For members
include
not
that, it basically will be your recommendation, and then there's, of course, a staff report and a letter when you present, or chairman traditionally presents to town council. So within that presentation, you can include whatever it is that you think is valuable information to them, including previous passes and what could ideally be used with more funds.
I think our recommendation to the town council, we would highlight that, look, this is where really the number we were wanting to fund. We see these organizations being worthy of all this, but we're also being realistic, not knowing what that number is. If we have to make cuts, this is our secondary. So the one we're going to pass and recommend is going to be the one we feel most comfortable with, but that doesn't mean we can't say, you know, we really wanted to do this, but we sharpened the pencil and got down to this. If that money is there, let's yield back to what we've talked about on the other recommendations and get them to boost those numbers back up to that first pass. We'll be sure to include the first round passing and whatever is ultimately voted on and recommended from this committee.
Great, I just want to make sure that they're aware of our deliberations from now until we get to the end of this process of what we were thinking and what we were going through before they start voting.
Any other conversations before we make another pass here?
We're gonna make another pass, but I'm not sure if anybody's changed their position on where they stand with pass number one. So this could be.
I agree. Maybe we should just start. Is there anything on this list that you see? Let's just call them out. If you have a discussion and one you'd like to see a change made to sharpen this. If not, then, you know, pass one will be the one we can vote on. Are there any of these that we'd like to discuss and make a change to after looking at the first pass?
One thing that I think we need to keep in mind is that when we start taking money from some of these smaller organizations, it's going to have a greater impact than it is on some of these larger organizations. And we need to keep that in mind. Some of these little budgets are very tiny, and $3,000 and $4,000 can make a big difference to those folks. So I would suggest that we look at some of the larger amounts and see if we can trim those first and see where we wind up and then move on from there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think our first pass here, we've kind of notched down on some of the smaller ones. The ones that were significant, yeah, exclusively, those smaller ones that, again, those are the smaller organizations that the tourist number doesn't drive the same as the others as well. And I think that's why they see the first cut. I wouldn't recommend going through this. I'm personally not going to go through and recommend anything you see on yellow here to be reduced any further. That's for sure. Any reductions that come are going to come from the other applicants.
On the other side of it, some of the larger organizations provide the most return and also have the greatest impact on the community. So,
You're making it worse.
so I know that you mentioned saying what happens if we take $2,000 off each thing, and of course the smaller organizations that would have greater impact. Could theoretically look at a percentage. But
we do
once
this-
again, there's a part of me that says, being that we don't know the exact number.
You humor me for this. Can we go through and take if it's projected there's a 9% decrease across this, just do a blank 9% decrease on all of these and see where that stands?
If I may, if you took 5% off of this current round, you get $209,000, which gets us within close range. So if you want to take that approach, I would look more at 5%. I think we also may want to just look at some of the ones that are looking for increases. Obviously, costs are up, we understand that, but those that are holding the number, I would try to support that more so than those looking for bigger increases.
I know
I have a
none of
question.
these represent an ask that's more than what they're eligible for, right? We've done that due diligence.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
So that being said, what is the impact of the 5% across the board, which is?
Well, another way of looking at it, so the ones that dropped out from last year total 366,000. So in theory, if we keep everybody whole from last year, in other words, keep them the same instead of giving them an increase, we are at the target number.
Also,
Does that make sense?
do we look at it as maybe some of these larger organizations have the ability to replace with other funding the money that might be cut? Is that something
They
we
may
look
not
at?
be, I don't know if they're able to replace that funding, but they may have to make a change to their overall budget and marketing efforts, if
There's not a general answer to that. There'd have to be a case by case.
Yes, some could apply for affiliated agency, but one of the issues would be that we're looking at a general decline in the amount of resources that are going to be available in total. So that's going to be affected as well. So the funding might not be there for that.
Let's make another pass here. And let's look at last year's recommendation and awarded amount from town council versus this year's request and see if we can find some middle ground on some of these for pass two and try to shrink that deficit a little bit between the two. Any objections to that passing through? Okay, we'll start at the top with the Art League of Hilton Head. Town council approved last year 75,000. The request for this year is for 80,000. And I'll lead us off. Let's go ahead and put in last year's town council awarded amount of 75,000. Again, when we go to town council, this number that we were to throw out, if we were to approve the second round, we would be sure to say, look, the only reason you're seeing a reduction here as to the recommendation is because of the lack of funding that's available. And there's a lot of circumstances that tie into that. One being just a decrease in the pool that's available, also the burden of the 15% that has reduced our amount as well. So that's why this body is going to go through, make a recommendation for reduced amounts to these organizations, not because they're not eligible, they don't meet the threshold. We just have to find some savings at some point. Art Center, Coastal Carolina, last year was 430,000. This year's 447,000. The recommendation here,
just going through and reducing from the old one, or are we going through each one here?
One by one. Yeah. Let's go ahead and reduce this one down, if you're okay with it, to 430,000. That's last year's approved amount. David Carmine Memorial Foundation last year was 181,000. Any recommendations to adjust this one or leave as is?
For applying last year's numbers as a way to look at this, much as we're all supporters of all of these organizations,
Would you like to just plug in for the rest of these just to get that sum total again at the bottom? Okay. All right, I'm just going to read these off, or if you need me to, or you can follow.
I think it would be easier to do that, to plug that in and then review some of the organizations that were asking for more.
Significant increase.
But also use the reasoning of why they were asking for more money. For example, a place like the Arts Center might be asking for more money because of cost of electricity. Might be easier to work backwards from this as well.
Let's get these numbers in from last year's approvals and then go back and see. Okay.
Anybody have any opposition to that?
All right, we'll give town staff a moment to plug these numbers in. Again, leaving.
It does your application process less.
You can leave that one at 350. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that we would review it now and look at.
No, if you could, let's just put them in at last year's approval amount. So going back, I'm sorry. I want to keep the recommendations, the ones that are in yellow, at that number for now. You'll see Concourse stays the same. They had a reduction in their ask of 12,000. That's why that one hasn't moved. Those stayed the same. Those two stayed the same as last year. Be 330 for the symphony.
Time to have this kind of discussion while we're waiting for this. What I'm concerned is, we're not going to support more. Application reflected their initiative. We're not going to be able to recognize that by staying flat to tough decisions we're having to make, but
Yeah, I think what,
difficult for us to give all the consideration. There are initiatives that we had hoped to support.
I agree in the fact, I think that the object is to work backwards from this list though, right?
yeah, we'll go back through and then those ones that we saw, I'll just,
Yeah, I would agree, like if the symphony's offering more services and they're generating a bigger response, then we should fund that. So we can, if we work backwards from this as opposed, I think the other way would have taken more. I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Sea Turtle was 70. Yeah, thank you. You can leave TEDx at 10,000. They had a reduction in their ask. Okay, so this second pass is just looking at what we discussed in pass one, some reduction in some of the requests, and then pair it up with what was approved by town council. Now I think our job is to go back and look at the difference. I'll just use the example of the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. There's a $100,000 difference between the request last year and the request this year. Again, this is one of those applicants that we talked about. They've taken on the burden of marketing themselves, where they had been receiving those funds just from a different source or from assistance from the DMO. They're now taking that on themselves. So I'm just using that as an example. We'll start at the top and come on down, but if we'll look at what this year's request is and last year's approved amount from town council, and then I think we just find some medium ground there and try to find a number we feel really comfortable about for pass three, and then we'll look at pass one and pass three kind of to make our decision. Conversations there. Everybody okay with that?
Well, if we add 100 back in for golf, we're still about 60 over, I think, right? Can we go down? Can you go down, scroll down, please? So we would be at 3,962.
Mm-hmm. Could you highlight that cell green, please? The one that we've gone through and discussed and changed, or, okay. Yellow. Okay, now let's start up at the, now that we see them side by side, I think we should make one more pass here and on each one weigh what we talked about in the first pass and on the second pass of what was approved last year, and then make a recommendation on a number that we're going to vote on and approve to take to town council. And then, again, we would include, here's what we really wanted to do in pass one, and funding was available. We've done our best to present to you what town staff has presented to us as what we believe is going to be available for reimbursement dollars, and then ultimately put that in the hands of town council to make the final recommendations and awards.
I ask if, and pardon my naivety if I should know this, does the chairman present this verbally or just electronically?
Verbally, at the meeting.
That works, that could help us.
Yeah, I think we could go to bat for where this committee really stands on what it is, but we're going to make a recommendation in reduced amounts just to play ball and make sure that the number is correct or closer to. I still think we're going to be over, no question, because we're going to go in and add on this third pass back to some of these organizations. Again, I really feel like our hearts are in where we're recommending on pass number one, but let's do our best to try to shrink it a little bit if we can. Anybody want to take a look? I don't think we need to go through these, but if you have one you want to call out and we'll have a conversation about making that adjustment, I'd like to start there. I'll start with the Golem Museum. I would recommend fully funding, taking that in pass three here back to 180.
Where do we go to?
Up for discussions.
I recommend fully funding the Golem Museum. I recommend fully funding the Arts Center of Coastal Carolina too. Costs of
All right, so we're going to go ahead and plug in 180 back into this one. Going down the list, the Rec Association here. Going from the request this year of 75,000 to 60,000. Let's put 70,000. That's my recommendation. I'll open up to you for anybody else to make a.
I just want to go back. Martin suggested that we move Arts Center back to the 447.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Let's just start at the top again. I kind of skipped over. Art League of Hilton Head. First pass was 80, second on last year's recommendation, and approved amount was 75. I'm okay with leaving this one at 75. Again, we're going to have to make a decision at some point. The Art Center, I believe this was a 3% increase over last year, which is well below the economic impact that they're feeling.
The only reason I'm recommending we consider recommended in round two was, at this point, we've almost just been focusing. While it's a smaller ask, it's also a larger percentage of their total budget, and it might be as impactful. Not get what they're asking for. Type of meet in the middle here, I think it would be our consideration.
You want to do where middle of those 17,000 difference, so 4,300, 438,500. You okay with that? That's like in the middle of those two for. Difference here is 4,000. If we're going to use that same kind of matrix, move this one up to kind of split the difference on each of these. Is that? Because we know that there is an increase year over year of expenses. So this one would go to 183.
If you do that across the board, we're just gonna get back where we were. I don't think that makes any sense.
You're right. We're going to be below what we did in pass one. So pass two will be lower than pass one. Pass one is our like pie in the sky. Pass two is what was recommended. We're going to be higher than round two here, but lower than round one. I believe we discussed the Golden Museum. I think if we're going to use that matrix, we do need to apply the same thing here. Put them at 165. This one would stay the same. There's no increase. This would stay 15. Oral Society would stay at 15. Concourse at 350. All of those would stay the same until we get down to the St. Patrick's Day Parade. That one would stay the same as well. The rec center, we've already met in the middle there on that one. We could take that one up $250. I'm sorry, $2,500 on the rec center. 72,500. Is that correct? 15. Yeah. Both the wine and food festival, Rhythm and Brews would stay the same.
It's just a question, Mr. Chairman, if we can go back to rec center, if you want to take half it, it would be 67.5.
Yes, 67, correct. Sorry, I apologize. That would stay the same at 2,980. Symphony Orchestra at 340. $52.5. $150. That stays the same at 61,897. The next three stay the same. I think the Rotary Club is one that we need to have more discussion on, being that it's a first-time applicant. I don't want to suggest that we cut that one in half between not existing and a first-time applicant. Any reductions on this one? Or leave it at 40,000?
I think, I applaud the initiative, but I think it's a little bit of a stretch with regards to the use of accommodations taxes. And I know we've already had plenty of discussion on this, but since we were running short in funds, and it's a new application, I think we might have to pass on this.
I think my recommendation would, I feel the same way. Again, when we go to the town council and we say, look, we really want to award them a $40,000 grant, we put that ball in the court of town council.
I move that we come back to it as the last item.
Okay, let's skip that one. We'll go down to Sea Turtle Patrol. It stays at 70,000. Who wants to do the math on that one? $269,200. TEDx stays at 10,000. Boys and Girls Club stays the same. That would go up 375. $387.50.
Five.
No, I'm sorry, at 500. Sorry, not 50. Sorry. First Tee at 45. Heritage Library would stay at 135. Well, let's talk about Heritage Library. We recommended that one down to 135 from the request of 143. We kind of took that one down. Was that based off of eligibility reimbursement dollars, or did we just make a recommendation to reduce
Based
that?
on last year's number, I think just staying stable.
Staying the same. For this pass, do you want to put it back or leave it at 135? We'll leave it at 135. Outside foundation stays the same. And the sandbox, let's just round that one up to 62,000. We still have to go back to the Rotary Club for discussion with that one, Boyd, but we've gotten that down from 294 to 109.
Being that I believe that this number is underestimated. Might be for either increasing funding in other organizations to what their ask was, or funding this. I think that this item, if not fits ATAX spending, it definitely fits the general fund and something that the town should invest in. So, not sure if it should come out of this budget, considering that other organizations are losing a lot of asks. Things would be, are we ready to add something new if we're going down in funding? However, it's effort.
I think I would recommend not funding this from this body, but highly supporting it in front of town council when we make our recommendations. If we had to make a decision here, this one was a kind of a question mark for the entire committee of the eligibility. We're fully behind it, fully want it to be supported. Honestly, I believe it's just an initiative that the town is going to take on, though.
They're also trying to sell private sponsorship dollars to fund the entire project.
Yeah, there's a good chance that they not need that whole reimbursement.
Okay.
As long as you guys all advertise on it,
I mean, leaving it off, we still are $100,000 over. So including it, then we become $140,000.
And again, and we're going to need to go back through these again, and some of these that we reduced, when we start thinking about the growth that some of these organizations have, we have automatically reduced them just to look at it. But now on this, I hate to do this, but we're going to have to make it pass one more time on here if we can add a field, and then talk about the ones that need to be bumped back up closer to what we really feel should be recommended for that organization. A lot of these being the larger, stronger organizations that are really driving tourism dollars, the ones that their dollars go a little bit further as well, and their touch is a little larger. So,
As I said earlier, I would move for fully funding the Arts Center and the Symphony, for the services they provide. I don't see a problem with being, I think that this number is underestimated. Last quarter, so.
okay, if you have one that you'd like to make a recommendation to change back on this sheet, let's go ahead and in the third round there, we'll just make a change. And the yes.
I just got a comment, I'm authority in Hilton, and that's not the organization we didn't meet in the middle one. So I don't know if that was oversight or.
Oh, sure. Let's take a look at it. Sorry. Art League. You're right. We didn't. If we can move that one back to 77,500. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, in that column. $77,500. You could put it in the third.
The third column.
You can put it in the third. We just over. Yep. Do any others stick out from this quick pass through? Everything's okay. Okay, any changes to looking at the third column here for the third round? Any changes to the Art League? Is everybody comfortable with a recommendation of 77,500? We'll say the same there. We'll just make a change in this third round if you don't mind. You don't have to add another column. Just make a change. For the Art Center of Coastal Carolina, recommendation?
I recommend fully funding it because it's such an economic driver.
I would agree.
My question, if we're looking at tourists and visitors, and or so, I mean, does that justify? I know it's a great organization and it provides a lot to the island, but based on numbers, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if it was a one-time event, you may look at it that way, but because it's stretched out over a whole portfolio of a year, obviously you're going to have local engagement and you're competing against all of those local people that are purchasing tickets. I just think that they do serve our tourism market extremely well.
One of the metrics, Chris, we've looked at in the past is, what does it cost per tourist? And I think they're in the $11 range per tourist. So it's a big number, but in terms of so many different events and they bring in so many people. And a lot of those people are people who stay here for a week.
Yeah, also, and it's an expensive, it's the amount of money they're generating off that $11 is.
Yep.
Let's not forget that our chairman's going to recommend that we use column 1, our first round recommendation, and then required to third. I think we're sharing the burden. We're not dramatically impacting, although I don't want to minimize the impact of reduced tasks, but I think we're job of sharing the burden with everyone instead of having it be so I'm optimistic about third quarter numbers just because port operations that we had a pretty big spike.
Just made one more number. Martin brought up the economic impact, and I don't know that I believe all of the economic impact numbers that we see within the applications, but the estimated economic impact for the Art Center is a little over $3.5 million. So difficult to not cut a big number in here because it does impact other organizations. The point is to really focus on those that drive tax dollars. Not that one, I think.
I'm going to make the recommendation that we move that one back to full funding. I know it is a larger organization, but I believe their impact is significant. And it's a good spend of the town to invest in that. Any objections to that?
No, but I think we should talk about if we don't get full funding, if we don't get the dollar amount, where's that money that we're adding back into them gonna come from?
Okay, so would you like to leave, we can take a vote and, our recommendation would come from round one. This is the recommendation we're making, even though it's above what we know the predictions are coming in. This is really where we feel the applicants, where they stand, their eligibility. If we had the funds available, this is what we would recommend for each of these. And then it would leave it down to those numbers coming in from the state, and town council would review, all right, we're gonna recommend the first round of funding. If not, our backup plan would be, the third, use these numbers as of where we've done the work for you to go back and shave your recommendations from last year versus this year's request, and have done our best to kind of get closer to what that number is.
Yes,
So,
that if there's a shortfall, then round three would be our recommendations for their deliberations, because they're gonna deliberate from there
yeah.
themselves, and the organizations will be there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only concern, I think, looking at this whole list would be the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association, which they're more reliant now on accommodations tax funding versus the DMO, right? Unless we can find a way for the DMO to, restart or again, continue supporting the group in 2025.
I feel like we're splitting the, burden of that with the DMO. The DMO should,
If we could, I'd like to, again, because of what they've picked up, I don't want to punish them the same way. I just taking that one up maybe to 175, they've taken on the burden of marketing themselves, doubling the burden, giving them knocking off half of their, the difference. It's a significant reduction in their ask. Again, I think we're going to go through and take a vote as what to recommend. I think that the first round is the one we're going to vote on for what we're going to recommend, but then we'll have numbers through the third round as our contingency plan.
I think it was mentioned before, when do we roughly get these numbers, and then when is it presented?
It's going to be presented at January 14th there. Do you have an estimated time of what the state has told you? Should it be before the end of the year, or did they give you a? Any word from the state as to what this number is? Okay, so is there a chance that we go into January's 14th without knowing what that number is?
I'm hoping right now we're calling it again. I'm hoping to have a better number hoping by the end of November.
Okay.
That's for Q3, but Q4, you won't have January 14th.
I think Q3 is going to have the biggest shift. Q4 is going to be what it is. It's just not as impactful as what we're going to see coming from the third quarter of this year. So anybody want to make a change to anything that's in round three? We used round two just to measure against last year's recommendations and approved amounts. So
Are we changing the Low Country?
yeah, I would like to see a change to the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association to 175.
We also make a recommendation that use the number that's closest to what the better estimate is at the time for that round.
Can you elaborate on that?
If we're gonna get a better idea of third quarter numbers, and there's gonna be fourth quarter, and fourth quarter doesn't really change that much. We'll have a better estimate of how much is available, and then using the round that's closest to there.
Yeah, town council will use that number. Again, we're gonna vote today to make a recommendation, being a little bit in the dark as to where we are. We're not gonna have the opportunity to come back and make a change to what our recommendation is gonna be the town council, right? So today is the day that, even though we're 294,000 in the first round, I think that's the one we're going to vote on to recommend the town council with hopes that that funding of $4,186,065 is available. Right, but then we'll have this second number of just over $4,028,965 as if that number's not there, we've kind of done some work to shave off half of that difference.
Mr. Chairman, my only other change would be that I would ask that the symphony orchestra, because they are providing additional offerings, be put to $345,000.
Any objections to that? Okay, let's put $345,000 there.
I'd like to just point out that the shelter code years. This group represents the 9%. Something that we all know does.
They were saying the expenses for fireworks have gone up dramatically, so
You want to move that one up to, just as a, take that to 280,000? Any objections to that? Okay, let's go 280,000 for Shelter Cove Harbor Company. Okay. Any other applicants or recommendations that want to be amended before we take a vote? Seeing none, I would open a motion.
So move.
What is your motion, please?
I move for approval of the first round as the first option and round 3 as the fallback option to present to town council.
I'm going to take that up as two different motions, if you don't
Okay,
mind. Motion
that's
number
fine.
1 is going to be, if I'm hearing it correct, to recommend what is in our first round of $4,186,065. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Then I'll take a vote here. All those in favor of approving the recommendation of $4,186,065 detailed by each organization on the sheet, signify by raising your right hand, please. Any objections? Any abstention? Okay, that will be our first recommendation to town council. Now we'll take up the second motion of approving, correct me if this is wrong, but approving the third pass as our contingency plan of something we will offer the town council as if there needs to be a reduction because numbers aren't met, then our recommendation would be to fall on the third pass. Is that your motion?
Can that be stated in that manner where it clearly says, if necessary,
Sure, that if necessary, our round 3 would be our recommendation. Required, whatever's appropriate
Can we
language.
make sure that that's completely obvious in the packet for that town council?
Let's do this. The motion is going to be to approve the third pass, and then we'll open that up for discussion. There's a motion to approve the third pass as a contingency plan to the town council. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, I'll open that up for discussion. That being marking this recommendation.
I would just want town council to, because they're not here, so I want them to be aware that we didn't have the final numbers. And,
There will be an official letter from the chairman, so the chairman will get to look at it, review it, approve it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll now vote. All those in favor of our third pass here of $4,044,765 to be included in the packet, the town council, signify by raising your right hand. Any opposed? Okay. Approved there. Okay, that brings us to the public comment section. Do we have any public comments today?
Public comments.
I'll open it up if
Oh,
you'd like.
sorry.
Sure. If you don't mind, please introduce yourself and your address for the record, please.
I'm Christy Cohen, on behalf of the Darius Rucker Intercollegiate. I just wanted to ask that town staff reconsider putting this on the agenda not until January 14th. That really puts everybody who has a first quarter event or an early second quarter event at a huge disadvantage. You have to make commitments for advertising. We're used to having a November or early December date, and waiting till January unfortunately makes the money that we generously received virtually unhelpful, because you have to make advertising commitments more than 6 weeks in advance. My event alone is at the beginning of March, and St. Patrick's Day Parade. There would be other ones that this really detrimentally affects. Last year, the meeting was in December where it was discussed, I believe mid-December. That was hard enough because most magazines and things need commitments before then. But I don't think any of us, me included, feel comfortable making commitments and taking that kind of financial risk, because as we've seen here today, anything can really happen with your grant when it gets to town council. So in the past, we've also done a meeting in November around Thanksgiving time, whatever that meeting is. So anyway, I just would really ask that we reconsider that January, because it's a real challenge otherwise.
Yeah, I'll be sure to include that in my report and when I meet
Okay.
with them on the recommendation of, moving this. It used to be historically in the same calendar year that we have this event, and it's
Yeah,
got
at the
moved to
latest,
January,
yeah.
which does put a stress on organizations that are, as you mentioned, it really does.
May I say
Yeah,
something?
thank you.
And I apologize to all of you if it puts any kind of distress on your organizations. The reason why we're doing it in January this year is because we just had elections. So we have 2 new council members, and they're not going to be acting as council members until January. That's the reason why in this particular year, we're doing it in January, to allow the new council members to be sworn and be participant and be part of this decision as it relates to the tax grants.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I'm just not sure how to balance it with, there's a lot of money that actually we wouldn't be able to, we just wouldn't be able to use. Or we have to take a huge financial risk and hope that the new council supports some version up there of what the tax committee has given. So that's just, I understand, but on the other hand, there's a balance to applicants. The whole reason we're doing this is to support events, but if it really hurts events, then would that be something that the current council would be willing to take up? Maybe they take up only first quarter or early second quarter events, or is there a happy medium that we could come up with to, satisfy both?
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I will bring this to the attention of our town manager and see if there's anything he would like to do with this.
Yeah, before I open it up, I'm curious about next year's calendar. We have our schedule of 2025, but do you anticipate in 2025 town council moving this meeting back into December since it's not being an election year?
Yes, I think we can accomplish that. Again, this year is a special year because of the elections, but I don't see an issue with moving it to December.
Okay.
I was just gonna ask, I certainly agree with your sentiment. I don't know that having 2 new council members is the reason to move this back. I recognize what your thought process is, but I think if it does some harm to certain organizations, I don't know if we as a committee can make a recommendation that town council hold that meeting earlier.
I think it's really going to depend on whether or not the state gets the numbers in front of town council. We could definitely go to them and request that they move this agenda item.
What is the
But I
schedule
don't
for
see
the,
that happening.
I'm sorry, what is the schedule for the December town council meeting?
So December 3rd
December
is the
3rd.
next town council
Swearing in
meeting.
is the first?
So we have one on November 12th. Of course, we're not ready for that one. And then the other one is December 3rd.
I guess my point is that if it's historically been done in December and the rationale is the election, while well thought out, we never have those numbers finalized by December. We're still making estimates, obviously.
Yeah, normally by this meeting, we normally have Q3. We normally have the revenues for Q3.
Right.
So the only estimated quarter that the only estimate we do is Q4. So this is a different year. Unfortunately, we are not able to get the numbers, but again, we're calling the state again and see if we can get at least, if not the revenue, at least information on what we should be expecting for Q3. But I will bring this to the attention of the town manager, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
To amend my thought then, in the event that we do get third quarter numbers, I would ask that this committee ask town council to do, so that organizations can have what they.
We'll put a draft to town council and to the town manager, making those recommendations. Your points are well taken, and we'll make sure that we voice those concerns to them as well. I do understand it being an election year with 2 new members coming in, but we'll make the request and see what we can do. Yeah, absolutely. Any other public comments? Mr. Fluker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James Fluker, member of the public now. Sat in that hot seat for 3 years, sat on opposite sides on 3 others. The first 3 years I was on this committee, we had the same problem. We were fortunate, or unfortunate, I guess, during the COVID years, that I was also got a chance to be chairman, that we had sufficient funds to meet all the projects. That's not the same anymore. I think you've done an admirable job of trying to split the baby as it is. My recommendation, I'd ask the finance chair, are there any workshops with town council between now and the end of the year?
I am not aware of any workshops.
Okay, is there any opportunity to schedule a workshop or anything like that, or is that?
And the topic will be to talk about ATAX and
Yes.
how it works and all that.
Yes.
Our mayor is the decision maker for the agenda items. Actually, right now, there's a mayor meeting to talk about agendas for the next 2 months or the next year. I can go ahead and submit that to their attention.
And as part of that, I would ask that the 2 council people elect also be invited to that to put their 2 cents in if they could as well. And that the ATAX chair be invited to that workshop to make the presentation along with you as well as the finance director, because that's trying to get more information to them. So if there's a consensus, I know there's no business can be done at that meeting, but if there's a consensus as to the numbers, perhaps it gives more clarity to these first quarter applicants to get something done. Because right now we're trying to make a wheel that's never been made before. And I understand your position. But again, congratulate you on working through the difficulties, because I've been there and I understand them. And there are going to be some organizations that are disappointed in what you've done. And this is their opportunity to lobby directly to the town council, because we've seen it happen in the past when we've had to make these tough decisions, and let the town council make them. All you can do, and the idea of this committee is to give them your best effort to make a clean recommendation based on the information you have, be able to give them why you made that recommendation, because all you can do is ask, they trust you, and that's the idea, is to keep the town council's trust. And as long as this committee's working to do that, give them your best recommendation based on the information you have, then you've done your job. You don't allocate the funds, you don't do any of those things, you're just recommending to them how, based on the 20+ hours of applications you heard and all the work you've done in your offices at home and otherwise, you're making your best efforts. So I thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll seek a motion. Oh, yes.
Before we adjourn, I just want to express thanks to Shanna and the town staff for all the work that they did to give us the information we need to work on, and for the finance folks for providing as much as they possibly can to us, and all the applicants who really, I think that this is my second year on the committee, did a much better job in general trying to get information to us. So thank you all.
Anything else from the committee? Just echo the sentiments. Thank you very much to everybody on this committee, town staff for organizing, receiving all the applications and getting them to us. It's a lot of documents. You guys know you assemble them for each of your organizations. But they get to be on the receiving end of all those applications and then delegate it out to us. So that's much appreciated. We're going to do everything we can for each of these organizations to push these through to town council, try to get some answers as well when it comes to the timing of these things. So if there's no other business to be conducted, I'd look to adjourn. Any objections? We're adjourned.